Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Paul Clem with the Oregon Relocation Team coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And in this video, we're going to look at Southeast Portland, which is a really popular area for people to move to when they're moving to the city, and also a really popular area for people to spend time. So even if you end up living out in the suburbs, Southeast Portland is definitely an area that you're going to be visiting from time to time. You have really popular commercial corridors like Southeast Hawthorne, Southeast Division, Southeast Belmont, great little neighborhoods like Sellwood. You have areas like Mount Tabor. So there's a lot that we're going to highlight in this video, and a lot of these areas are probably going to sound familiar if you've started to dig into different neighborhoods in Portland. Portland itself, of course, is separated by the Willamette River. You have the west side and the east side, which really are going to give you vastly different experiences, totally different dynamics when it comes to your day-to-day life. Now, on the east side of Portland, where Southeast is, of course, what we're talking about today, you're going to get dense urban residential neighborhoods, a ton of walkability, old classic historic Portland homes, a lot of historic charm, a lot of culture, in particular, the more stereotypical or kind of standard Portland culture that you might hear about, that might be part of what is bringing you to the area. You're definitely going to find that in much higher volume on the east side of the river. On the west side, you have the West Hills. Of course, you have downtown, but then you get up into the West Hills and then further west into a more suburban feeling part of the city. And so for a lot of people, when they're moving to the city, they already have their heart set on the east side or the west side. It's not always the case, but it tends to be something that people determine pretty quickly. And for Southeast Portland specifically, again, it's not a super confusing area. When you look at it on a map, it's all laid out on a grid. And when you're driving around, I think you start to get a sense pretty quickly that certain pockets of Southeast have their own feel, but you're going to get a lot of consistency throughout. But it really is the boundaries in Southeast Portland that kind of defines what your day-to-day experience is going to be like. So let's take a look at a map and talk about that some more. But before we do that, if this is your first time to the channel or you've been here and you haven't already and you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. And we've helped so many people relocate to Portland and move to the Portland metro area. And as real estate professionals, we absolutely love to help with that process. So if that's you, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video. Schedule a Zoom call with us and we can talk more about your move.
All right, let's talk about Southeast Portland. And probably the best place to start is just looking at the big picture. If we zoom out a little bit, just a quick overview like we talked about, Portland is separated by east-west by the Willamette River. You have Southeast Portland, Northeast Portland, Northwest Portland, and Southwest Portland. So Southeast Portland probably has the biggest footprint, and you do get a lot of consistency going west to east, but it is really going to matter where you end up in Southeast Portland. It's really going to determine what the lifestyle is going to be like, what type of property you're going to get, what you could expect to pay, how competitive the real estate market is, what type of amenities are going to be at your doorstep as well. I think somebody moving to Southeast Portland is really looking for the walkability. You really feel like you're living in a city neighborhood when you move to at least the part of Southeast Portland that tends to be the most attractive to most people moving to Portland, looking at Southeast. And if we look at the primary boundaries in Southeast Portland, I think this is really going to be the best place to start as far as wrapping your head around how Southeast Portland is laid out, because of course you're mostly on a grid system. You see some of these roads like Southeast Foster, going kind of diagonally, and you have a couple neighborhoods that buck the trend a little bit, but by and large, again, it's roads running north, south, east, west. So of course, on the western most side of Southeast Portland, you have the Willamette River as the primary boundary here, but really, if we're looking at Southeast, you could consider Highway 99 as probably the primary boundary. Up here in this kind of industrial area in particular, you're not really getting into a proper neighborhood until you get past really Southeast 11th and Southeast 12th. So actually, if we look at this map here, you can see just kind of this little city urban area here on the westernmost side of Southeast Portland, and it's around Southeast 12th where it starts to become much more residential. That doesn't necessarily hold true as you go south on Highway 99, where on the west side of 99, on the southern section of Southeast Portland, you have Sellwood-Moreland, a really popular neighborhood that we will definitely talk more about in this video. At any rate, though, you start to get into proper residential neighborhoods around Southeast 12th. On the north side of Southeast Portland, you have East Burnside, and Burnside is the road that runs east-west, cutting the north side of Portland in half from the south side of Portland. So everything north of East Burnside is northeast Portland. Everything south is southeast Portland. So that's pretty straightforward. And on the east side, it's not as cut and dry. You kind of have this line that moves as you go north-south, separating southeast Portland from what is primarily Gresham, all the way to the east in the Portland metro area. And then within these boundaries, and then on the south side, you have the county line. So this south border of southeast Portland, if you go across, you're into Clackamas County. So you're into Milwaukee, closer in, or you're into Happy Valley, a little bit further out. Milwaukee, it feels a little more like southeast Portland, just kind of an extension of southeast Portland as far as like the feel of the neighborhoods and everything. Happy Valley is like your quintessential suburban neighborhood, where if you look at kind of the density and the size of these lots here in Milwaukee, looks pretty similar to what you're seeing up here in actual southeast Portland. But if you get a little further east out in Happy Valley, you know, these are like rolling hills, and you get, you know, these bigger, newer suburban homes out in Happy Valley. The boundaries within these four borders are really going to be of a ton of consequence in terms of where you end up. So if we're looking at southeast Portland and what people typically think of when you talk about southeast Portland, it's going to be this section right in here. So neighborhoods like Buckman and Hosford Abernathy and Richmond and Sunnyside out to Mount Tabor. And this section, as far as kind of the contiguous area that feels more or less the same, is going to run to about 82nd, Southeast 82nd here. Or we could even just call it 205. So Montevilla is a neighborhood out here. Some of it's in Northeast, but a lot of it's here in Southeast that does extend past 82nd. Definitely a desirable area, an area that a lot of people end up moving to. And so again, if you're looking at this kind of top left section of Southeast Portland, this is really going to be what most people envision when you think Southeast Portland. And that is really primarily because of these main corridors. These are really hip, fun neighborhoods and entertainment districts that, again, even if you didn't live in the area, even if you didn't live in Portland proper, you're probably going to find yourself visiting at least from time to time. So here's Southeast Division, and you can see all the little restaurant symbols. And it goes on for dozens of blocks where you have great restaurants, coffee shops, shopping, etc. Southeast Hawthorne, similarly, and probably kind of like the OG main drag in Southeast Portland is Southeast Hawthorne. And again, this really kind of goes from like around 12th, where you get into the proper neighborhoods, really all the way to about 60th, or where Mount Tabor is, kind of the foot of Mount Tabor. So, you know, you get, again, dozens of blocks of just a ton of great entertainment and things to do. Southeast Belmont, similarly, you got a lot of great stuff going on Southeast Belmont and Southeast Stark, and then even East Burnside, you know, there's a lot going on. So in this section of Southeast Portland here, which is really only about a quarter of Southeast Portland as a whole, you kind of have everything that most people would want when they end up moving to Southeast Portland in terms of what they envision. You know, maybe if you have been researching Portland, looking at different neighborhoods, if you have visited Portland and you've gone to Southeast Portland, you've probably been spending time in this section right here. So the kind of borders within the boundaries here, you know, it's going to be East Burnside to the north, 99, you know, or just let's say the river to the west, 205 to the east, and Highway 26, or in Southeast Portland, it's Powell Boulevard to the south. This is, I don't know if you would say necessarily the most desirable part of Southeast Portland, but this is where most people would be spending their time. And this is the area that I think a lot of people would be gravitating toward, you know, who would be looking for a specific type of neighborhood. It gets a little bit less distinct when you look at these other sections of Southeast Portland. South of 26, or south of Powell Boulevard, you get into, I would say, a much more residential area in like Foster Powell and Creston Kenilworth and Mount Scott and Errol Heights, these areas in here. In a lot of ways, they feel very similar as far as the neighborhoods are concerned and the homes as you can get up here, but you don't have nearly the commercial offering as far as the entertainment and the restaurants and things like that. And I think because of that, at least in part, you do get some more affordability in these areas down here where you're not really all that far removed from this sort of primary section of Southeast Portland, but it's not like you have all of this stuff at your doorstep. You know, the walkability is where you really take a step back here in this area south of Highway 26. So I think a lot of people, when say, like, if you're visiting Portland and we're laying out tours and, you know, getting a list of homes to go see, a lot of people might choose homes that are here in these areas that they kind of are familiar with and they know, but it's not uncommon for people to choose homes to look at that are south of Highway 26 here as well. And I think a lot of people wanting to be in this type of area, you know, they look at the map and they say, okay, I mean, it's right there, it's not very far, fair enough. I think at least for some people, you know, we end up looking at houses in these areas, and I think people will find that it doesn't quite have the same vibe, the same feel, maybe the same culture or lifestyle as you can get around Hawthorne or Division or Belmont, for example. But it's not necessarily like these are areas that you should stay away from by any means. And again, you know, these are areas that are a lot quieter and a little more laid back. So I think there's people who are going to like that aspect of things too. Now, I should say too, in this section of Southeast Portland, you have some of Southeast Portland's best neighborhoods that really can fly under the radar a little bit. You know, if you've been looking, say, around Hawthorne and those areas, some of these areas down here tend to fall by the wayside a little bit, or people don't necessarily have them on their list when, if you like Hawthorne and Division and what those areas have to offer, there's definitely some pockets here in this section of Southeast Portland that I think would be worth checking out. Most notably is going to be Sellwood-Moreland, where a lot of people would just call all of this area Sellwood. Up here is Westmoreland. Down here is Sellwood. Officially, the neighborhood is called Sellwood-Moreland, but you have two main strips along Southeast Milwaukee, which turns into Southeast 17th, and then Southeast 13th in Sellwood. And you can see you're right there by the river. You know, you can get on Highway 99 and get up into downtown or other parts of Southeast Portland very easily. You're close to Milwaukee, so if you're looking for some big box stores and shopping down Highway 99 in Milwaukee, there's a lot going on there. You can get across the river, across the Sellwood Bridge, and into Southwest Portland very easily, or that way shoot up into downtown on the west side. You also have great access into Lake Oswego from Sellwood-Moreland. So this area is kind of on an island on its own. It feels like its own kind of self-sustained enclosed neighborhood, more so than you get in this, let's call it, again, primary section of Southeast Portland, where everything just kind of bleeds together and runs together. Down here in Sellwood, feels a little more buttoned up, a little more laid back, maybe a little more adult in some ways, where up there, just to the north, you know, you might have a higher volume of renters, and you might have a younger median age demographic, I would bet, than you do down here in Sellwood. And here you can see Southeast 13th, a lot of great restaurants and stuff going on there, and then 17th in Sellwood, Westmoreland. There's a lot going on there too. So this area, it really kind of stands out amongst all others in Southeast Portland in terms of it's the most unique, and it's definitely going to be one of the most popular parts of Southeast Portland, especially for people relocating here to Portland who maybe have kids. You see more kids running around, and it seems to be a little more family focused than some of the other areas of Southeast Portland. Down here too, you have an area called Eastmoreland, which we'll talk more about, and then Woodstock. Woodstock is kind of a sneaky little neighborhood because you're about 45 blocks east, you know, and you're down here south of Highway 26 or Powell Boulevard. So it flies under the radar a little bit, and it's just a little more kind of insulated or hidden, I would say. But Woodstock Boulevard through here, there's a ton of cool restaurants. You have this, I actually went here recently. It's kind of cool, you can see it. These food carts in here. This is a newer food cart pod in here in Woodstock. You got Woodstock Park here, so there's some walkable parks living in Woodstock. I would say Woodstock is definitely a really good alternative for people who like Southeast Portland, want to live on the east side, you know, maybe in some of these Southeast Portland neighborhoods, but it's maybe either a little bit too busy or too dense, too expensive, or hard to find something. In these areas, Woodstock is, again, going to be a really good area to focus on as well, where you might have a little bit of an easier time. And then the other almost half of Southeast Portland is east of I-205, and in a lot of ways it's going to feel like a different world living out here. You're out into East County, East Multnomah County. You are starting to border Gresham, so out here you start to feel like you're more an extension of Gresham than you are connected to some of these inner east side, inner southeast neighborhoods. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing so much as it is just a different feel. And you can get a ton of consistency throughout these areas here. I think it's a little less distinct than what you can get in this kind of primary area of Southeast Portland, or an area like Sellwood, or even Mount Tabor or Woodstock. We'll talk about specific areas here a little bit more. But you're out into different school districts out here, where the majority of Portland, you have Portland Public Schools, but you get this far east in Portland, and up here in Northeast, you have Park Rose School District, and then you have the Centennial School District in here as well. So again, different school district, more removed, with the freeway really creating that barrier and that boundary. Again, it's just going to be a different feel. This is really what so much of this area looks like. It's flat. It's still laid out on a grid. Some areas aren't. You're going to have some apartments kind of smattered throughout the neighborhoods. You know, some areas you have sidewalks, some areas you don't, some areas you still have gravel roads. It really, on one hand, is a little bit of a mixed bag, but so much of this area, you know, looks like what we're seeing here, just with this street view. One of the biggest distinctions here, too, in this East County section of Southeast Portland is so much of this area was built, say, post-war or mid-century. So you have primarily ranches, split-level homes, some tri-levels. You don't have a ton of daylight ranches because you don't have as much elevation change. And a lot of these homes still do have basements. Pretty much everything on the east side is going to have a basement. Some are finished, some aren't finished, some could be finished, some are bigger, some are smaller. But you're still going to get basements out here, but it's going to be a different style of home and a different era for sure. And when you're here on the east side of I-205, again, you're going to be pulled east into Gresham just as much as you are pulled west into the inner east side of Portland, or, you know, for sure to the west side of Portland. One of the great things about living this far east in Southeast Portland is you have some great access to nature and some green spaces. So a little bit further in the city, or at least, you know, right on 205 here, you have Kelly Butte natural area. So you have some hiking trails and things in here. And then an even bigger, kind of more open area is this Powell Butte Nature Park. And you can kind of see the elevation up here. And as you're walking around, you know, it's kind of cool. You can see, you know, the elevation and green space and trees here. And then looking east, of course, you have Mount Hood there. And you probably see Mount St. Helens. That's Mount Adams there. And that's Mount St. Helens there. So, you know, that's all pretty much right there on your doorstep, living in this easternmost part of Southeast Portland. And you're also going to be like 45 minutes to the mountain, to Mount Hood. So if we zoom out a bit, you know, if you live on the inner east side, or especially on the west side of Portland, you have to fight through the city to get east to get out to Mount Hood, where you would otherwise, where if you're this far east here, you can just hop on 26, you know, and get out to some of these Mount Hood villages, or get out to skiing like Timberline Lodge or Mount Hood Meadows here. Okay, so if you're thinking about moving to Portland, and Southeast is an area that you are considering, how should you think about Southeast Portland, and, you know, what should some of the considerations be as far as areas to focus on, and what it's going to be like living in different areas? Well, you know, we talked about how this area up here with these main corridors, it's going to be more dense, more busy, more walkable, more bustling, or a little more lively. I mean, I think, you know, this is really kind of what most people think of when they think about Southeast Portland. Down here, I think just south of Powell Boulevard, just south of this primary area of Southeast Portland, it's going to be similar homes, a little bit quieter, a little more modest, I think. On the east side of I-205, it's going to feel a little more suburban. It's going to be a different style of home, a different era of home, and you're going to get a lot more affordability out here. Again, you have different school districts. It is pretty removed to the point where, again, you're starting to bleed into Gresham. So you're kind of in this in-between point of being, you know, Portland, kind of inner Portland, part of Portland, and then being part of Gresham out here. There's a few neighborhoods that definitely jump out that I think people would be really interested in learning about if they were moving to Southeast Portland, especially some that don't necessarily get talked about all that much. You probably know Laurelhurst. So Laurelhurst Park is actually in Southeast Portland. Most of Laurelhurst, the neighborhood, is technically Northeast Portland, but We talked about boundaries, really this I-84 boundary. I mean, south of it, you're mostly in Southeast Portland. If you're north of it, you're all Northeast Portland here. So Laurelhurst kind of blends in and bleeds in with a lot of Southeast Portland, and this is one of definitely the crown jewels of Portland in terms of architecture and old historic homes. And you see like how everything is laid out on a grid in Portland. Well, in Laurelhurst, you have these curving, winding streets, and it just adds a ton of character. And I mean, this is definitely one of the most sought after neighborhoods and areas of Portland. I mean, the classic Portland architecture with, you know, craftsman style homes and Tudors and Cape Cods and, you know, the big four squares that are so typical of what you get in Portland. You know, you're going to get all of that. Another neighborhood that is arguably the best of both worlds when you look at being so close to Hawthorne and Belmont and Division, but having an upscale, private feel, a little more insulated. It's going to be this Mount Tabor neighborhood. And you can get a little bit of that in South Tabor and North Tabor as well, but once you get really up on Mount Tabor here, both kind of the foothills here with Southeast 60th is really kind of the boundary. We're maybe about 50 blocks east up into about 60th. These are really nice historic homes, bigger homes on average in here. And you're just right here at the kind of the foothills, or at the foot of Mount Tabor Park here. And then once you get up on Mount Tabor, you know, you start to get some views. It feels really private, really quiet. Just a really great, really unique area, one of a kind for sure. You know, if we're looking at areas that stick out, neighborhoods that stick out among the rest in Southeast Portland, Mount Tabor, Laurelhurst, definitely going to be among them. We talked about Sellwood-Moreland, definitely one of a kind, highly sought after neighborhood in Southeast Portland. Eastmoreland, so just east of 99 here, you have arguably the most upscale feeling neighborhood. You can see how insulated this is with, you have the highway, but then the golf course on the west side. You have Reed College and the Reed College campus on the north side. You have Cesar Chavez here, so kind of a busy road bordering it on the east side. And then you have Johnson Creek on the south side. So you have these natural boundaries and borders in Eastmoreland that really give it, I think, this private feel that has helped it retain this really kind of luxury upscale feel to it that it has. You can see, you know, there are some streets that kind of wind through here, you know, that give it a little more character as opposed to just being laid down on a grid. This area in here is, again, arguably kind of the nicest feeling neighborhood in all of Southeast Portland. And then the last one to highlight real quick is a neighborhood called Ladd's Addition. So just want to show you how the streets are laid out here. This is another one that, you know, for this one, you're kind of sandwiched right in the middle of everything as far as the busiest, most bustling section of Southeast Portland. So you have Southeast Hawthorne to the north, Southeast Division on the south, 20th on the east, so you're about 20 blocks in from the river. And on the west side of Ladd's Addition, you get into this industrial area in here. But when you look at the neighborhood itself, you get these really cool big homes on average. I mean, a lot like a Laurelhurst or an Eastmoreland as far as what you can get architecturally. You have this big circle in the middle. There's like a really tight-knit community, really a special place, really kind of a pride of ownership living in Ladd's Addition, where despite being, again, so, you know, in the mix and kind of right in the middle of everything, it's gonna feel more quiet and more private, yet you can just walk a couple blocks and get to Hawthorne, or walk a couple blocks and get to Division. So that's going to be pretty unique too. So if you're thinking about moving to Portland, and in particular if you're thinking about moving to the inner east side of Portland, which is such a popular area for people to move to when they're relocating here, and if you want to talk about specific neighborhoods and what different areas are going to be like, what the real estate market is like there, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video. Schedule a Zoom call with us and we can talk more about it. If this video was helpful, make sure to hit the like button. That helps us out a lot. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. As always, really appreciate you watching. Until next time.